Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stage one, week one episode of the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast. My name is Ron Martin. I'm your host as always, and I'm joined today by our usual guest, CDL Metrics. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I am excited to jump into some meaningful COD. I know we got a chance to see some a couple weeks ago, or at least somewhat meaningful. Still some things that might get worked out within the game, which I'm excited for. Hopefully, glide bombs actually like kill people now instead of just like doing no damage or whatever it was doing. Yeah, I'm really excited. Obviously, we still have like a month until the first LAN major, but online matches are fun too. So I'm excited to talk about them.
I will say that the bug fix about the glide bombs not killing people, that's been fixed.
Yes.
I've been seeing some matches online. You look at College COD and Challengers Elite, and glide bombs are in fact killing people as they should. So
Yes.
that is fixed. I mean, obviously there's problems in this game still. That was the most egregious issue, I think, when people glide bombs literally drop on people and they just walk it off. Um, that one was egregious. There's other issues too. There's like the fact we have two control maps for
Hmm.
hardpoint and for search destroy maps. Those are issues as well. um General, like the guns, I mean, I think they're a little imbalanced. The MP40, that seems a little strong. That seems like that's definitely the grandfather of the MP4 in Modern Warfare 2019. um the automation, the assault rifle, I think that shoots faster than the M4 in in,
Yeah,
in
I
modern.
think it
Like
does
it
too.
actually shoots so fast. Like it's a gun made of wood. Like it's made out of wood, and it's shooting bullets faster than guns in like our modern era. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to get fixed. That just seems kind of weird, but it's an interesting design choice. But yeah, I mean, I think overall the game does play well. Bocage is something. Um, just kind of crazy how things are happening at any given time in that map, and it just seems like people are at the point and they're out of the point. Like usually there's a flow to maps, right? Like they're in the point, get the break, out of the point. This just like people are just running in and out of the point and killing each other, and it's kind of crazy. But I mean, obviously because we still don't have five maps yet, so we need the fifth map, and then we can start cycling out other maps, which is a challenge. But I suspect by the we may not see Bocage at champs. So, but no, a lot of different things, but still, though, I think I was very happy this last week to see, not last week, 2 weeks ago, to finally have the CDL back. Um, Talking about last week, we actually had a good week, very
Hmm.
good week. We both were on Toronto to win the event outright, and that was great. That was beautiful, actually. We had some other great hits too. I mean, obviously, I don't like to brag too much about betting because it can go both ways, but like that was like, man, there was just some really great calls there, though. Um,
Hmm.
what do you think? What were you like? What was the most surprising thing to you, and then what was also the least surprising thing to you about the kickoff classic?
Um, Most surprising I'd say was they kind of go hand in hand. I would say Seattle impressed me a lot. Obviously, they were runners up. They beat London. They swept them day one. Looked really good. And then they run into Atlanta day two. Right after Atlanta get their like championship rings. It was essentially like a banner ceremony for Atlanta, who like maybe had the most dominant COD season we've seen in a while. Uh, they lose map Seattle lose map one on Bocage, and it's a blowout. It's 150 to 250. And then they come back. They win around 11 in search. They sweep Atlanta in control on Gavudu. Granted, that was they won one attack and won two defends on a very defensive favored map. So, but still, it's a sweep. And then come out and beat them on Tuscan, 250 to 196. It was just very impressive and pretty disappointing from Atlanta. Now, obviously, it's a preseason tournament, so I'm sure Atlanta will bounce back here in stage one. But yeah, Seattle came to play. They have a lot of young guns, obviously led by accuracy. He looked much improved from last year. Um, and yeah, in scrims, my preseason rankings didn't take into account scrims just because scrims are scrims, and we're only really seeing hard point and a little bit of control. Um, but in scrims, Seattle were one of the best teams. A lot of teams mentioned that Seattle gave them problems, and sure enough, they show up at this event and rattle off three straight, and then run into Toronto, unfortunately. So those were pretty surprising. Some other shout outs. Minnesota, I think people are maybe sleeping on now because they got swept by New York on day two. They played them tough. And as a Minnesota fan, I was at least happy to see that, like, they played them really close, even though it was a 3-0, right? It's the last thing you want to see. But, they fought against a good team. But yeah, I think a lot of people had question marks about Toronto. I did not. Um, we get a preseason tournament where 3 of the 12 teams are the same teams from last year. In general, you think those teams are going to do pretty good. Actually, Toronto was the only team of those 3 to win at least one match. But yeah, their teamwork is still on point. New game, everything looks the same. The comms are clean. The gun skill is there. It's kind of the same setup, like Insight and Cammy, right? The AR duo looks like they're going to carry that team. And obviously, there's a lot of other storylines we could talk about with Boston's first match, Thieves, right, a big upset over Optic, and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, it was just fun to see all the teams compete on LAN. I thought the casting crew did a pretty good job. Shout out Blaze, the on stage like interviewer. I thought he killed it of everybody. Like the casters did a great job, but the desk was good. But yeah, Blaze as a host was awesome. So yeah, just all around, I think a really good kickoff classic. And but yeah, I'm excited for like matches that actually mean something for the season as a whole for sure.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. I mean, yeah, Seattle, that was a huge upset. And we actually did say, I think, kind of an offhand thing I said if Seattle beats London, bet on Seattle against uh, Atlanta. I did not do that though, so I did not take my own advice. So I don't get to. I don't think I get to wave that around. But that is words that I said. I didn't follow them though. Um, but no, I mean it's yeah. There was a lot of interesting things. I think there's a lot of teams that are overlooked because of the results of the Kickoff Classic. Again, I think a lot. Obviously, the Kickoff Classic means something because it was a tournament that was played. But I mean, for some of these teams, like right now, and again, I ran my model with the results from the first tournament. It's like, oh, cool, Atlanta FaZe. You mean that team that's 0-1, right? And it's like, oh, it's like they're
Yeah.
sixth, and it's like, well, okay, they're not sixth, but there's no evidence that they're like the best team, right? But clearly they're better than sixth. But are they? Like this is the thing, right? So although the Kickoff Classic doesn't mean anything for say Atlanta's futures in this year, like you can't say that like you can't make a definitive conclusion about a certain team from the event. But for the teams that went kind of deeper though, you can make some conclusions about them. Toronto, I think, was a very interesting one because a lot of people thought. I think a lot of people were penciling in regression for Bance. A lot of people said that Bance was going to be the first team change. That probably was unlikely. A lot of people said they hadn't been scrimming, which was true, but they were scrimming in Europe. I think it was funny that one of them said they didn't think they were going to win the event because they hadn't been practicing that much, and then they did. But that may have actually helped them a little bit because if everything's just kind of chaotic and the teamwork really helped them, then that might. There's things that would have helped them. The thing was one of the reasons why we were on the Toronto odds at the plus 800. It wasn't because we were here like, oh, Toronto's the straight up the best team. We were just really hitting on it for the bad price
Mhm.
because like there's no way you can make the argument that the team that won a major made this major stage 5 final, lost it in epic fashion, but still made it and should have probably should have won it, and then also made the finals at champs. There's no way you can argue that they're plus 800 to win the first event the next year when they made no team changes, and the best teams also basically made no team changes. But the thing was, the Toronto price had to be there because the Optic price, right? Because if Optic open, if you put the right price on Optic, if you put Optic up to plus 600 or so, or plus 400, then everybody's going to bet on Optic, right? So the books actually they had to give us that good Toronto price to be able to balance it out, right? So
Mhm.
it's a piece of like it's some there's pieces of value in there. There's pieces of just being like, hey, this Toronto team is just better than people suggest. Yeah, the interesting thing about the casters is really good. Like I was concerned. Obviously, I think everybody kind of was that maybe the quality of the casters weren't going to be good, but they very much surprised me. I was very surprised in a very pleasant way. Um, Alley Cat was great. Yeah, the onstage talent was great. Um, I will say though that missing Merc and Maven that does hurt. That is still that does hurt a lot. It's kind of like watching it'd be kind of like watching Sunday Night Football and not having Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels calling it. That would be sad. And you were missing them, and I don't think they're coming back this year, unfortunately. But we'll probably, I suspect, with Microsoft taking over, I think we're going to see them back again in the future. But for now, I think it's still okay, even though we miss them. I think it's nice. My personal favorite is Miles and Chance. They're my personal favorite cast and crew, and they're still there, so I'm good. But um, yeah, I think Merc and Maven are solidly second behind them. But anyway, so we move on to the regular season now. Now, people who followed us last year and followed the CDL last year, they remember that teams were put into groups of six. So there was a group A, group B, and that was picked with this kind of playground style group, which was awesome. That was actually pretty cool based on the standings of the last major. And basically, you had these groups, and everybody played 5 matches. The other 5 teams in the group, and then rankings seeding was done that way. This year is different. This year, all the matches are pre-scheduled, but there are no groups. There's the groups aren't made. You just play 5 random teams, and then they rank you based on that. And that's not great. I'm not gonna lie. Um, there are some imbalances in scheduling. We can't really detect them as of yet, or how deep they are, because again, I mean, if you're playing Atlanta FaZe, you're playing the sixth best team in the game, right? So no, I mean that's the thing, right? It's hard to say definitively how strong these teams are at this stage, but for next stage and the other stages after, we're going to get a lot clearer picture of exactly how different some of these schedules will be. But yeah, no, it's that's going to be an issue going forward. But that being said, everybody makes it to the major, so I guess it's okay. But still, though, not the greatest in terms of balancing. But yeah, so we're hopping into the games this week, and we've got lots of really interesting games and really interesting matchups this week, and I think let's just get right to it. I guess if that's all we need to say about the Kickoff Classic, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, let's jump into it. So yeah, first matches are coming Friday, the 4th.
Yep.
And first one on the docket is Florida gets to kick things off again. They did at the Kickoff Classic. London and Florida in match 1.
hmm Yeah, and so actually, this is moving as we talked. So you were on Bovada, and you told me that it was London. I think you said London minus 135, Florida even. It's now minus 115, both sides on Bovada. If you are somehow listening to this podcast as we're recording it, which you are not, this is being recorded Wednesday afternoon. Um, Florida is plus 110 on Bet365, my preferred book. So if you're Canadian, and you're somehow able to go back into the past, grab that line. I did, so yay. But no, so London is basically even minus 115 on on each side. London minus 1.5 plus 150. Florida plus 1.5 minus 200. Over 4.5 plus 150. Under 4.5 minus 200. Um, Now, when I first was watching the matches, I said we're going to get great value on London next week because London went 0-3 out to Seattle, and Seattle turned out to be one of the better teams, but Florida beat LAG, and then Florida beat LAG, and then that was better, but then we but
Lost to
then lost to
Toronto.
Toronto, yeah, in 3-1, but they did win the Search and Destroy. They lost the 2 hard points. So I thought we were going to get something like Florida minus 250, London plus 200, or maybe London plus 150 or something like that. That's what I thought we were going to get. It turned out London opened the favorite, at least on my book. London was like minus 125. Then, from what I could tell, Florida played a scrim against Boston, lost all four hard points, lost both controls. They blew it out to plus 150. Now they're back up to plus 110. I think now they're basically even on some other books. What are we missing here? Why is London this big of a favorite? Or why is this an even game? Like, Florida should probably clearly be the favorite here. And I've already put bets on Florida here. I see no reason why this price should be this high in London. And also, I'm going to eye here. I'm going to go here to the match markets. And if you want, on Bet365, Florida minus 1.5 is plus 275. That is that looks very tasty. Um, I'm gonna go bet on that, and I'll let you talk. Go ahead. What do you see? Are you agreeing the same thing here as me, or not?
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I have no explanation. Usually I have some sort of explanation when I see a price that doesn't make sense. But this one I actually can't think of anything other than I know you had mentioned before we started recording that Florida had a scrim set versus Boston, I think, and they did not perform well at all. So maybe that one scrim that people saw made people jump on London. But again, what did London show you at the kickoff? Not a whole lot. They didn't have a map win. Um, yeah, they played on Bocage, lost 250 to 203, which is a loss. Like, it's a loss. You know, it wasn't super close on a map that's really mixy. They lost Search and Destroy on Berlin, 6-4. So they couldn't quite even get to a round 11. And then the control on Tuscan, they got swept 3-0. So I don't know how that's super encouraging. And considering that most people have London at or near the bottom of their power rankings, you know, maybe 11th or 10th, um, I don't know how you can have them favored over Florida at all. Like, I know a lot of people think Florida are in that same area of the power rankings, somewhere at or near the bottom. But Florida showed us something. I think they answered a lot of questions on their team construct. It was something we talked about before the kickoff, like how is Awakening going to look running a sub? Turns out he's very, very, very good at it, like he was in Modern Warfare. He kind of flexed and played both roles 2 years ago. He looked amazing. Dave Patty, a rookie, you know, he's main AR now. Okay, we've never really seen this guy. He held his own. Skies was Skies. He pulled out an SMG and looked good with that too. And Vivid, I think is just an underrated player. Like, you look at just like pure KD related stats, um, and it's never super pretty, but he is a fast player who puts pressure on the opposing team, and that's worth something. Very accurate too. I know last year, at one point, they shouted him out as having the highest bullet accuracy percentage. Now, you know, take that for what that is. If he's shooting people in the back all the time, that makes it easier. But still, he's an underrated player, like underrated enough where Rambo Ray from Dallas Empire decided to acquire him halfway through the year. So this Florida team is solid. Um, yeah, they're for sure better than London. Like, does that mean London might win this matchup? Absolutely. They could for sure win it, but I honestly have no clue how their prices are so close. So yeah, play this however you want, but strong lean to Florida. We did see Florida run into Toronto in the second round. They, you know, didn't look good in hard point or in control, but they won the search handily. So their search is on point, which I think a lot of people didn't expect. And their hard point and control are like serviceable right now. London, I just don't know what argument you have for London in this situation.
Well, I mean, I don't see the argument for London as clear as I see the argument against Florida. I think the argument against Florida is they beat LAG, who people think are a bad team. They're up next. We'll talk about them very soon. Um, but I think the argument is they beat LG, a bad team, and then they lose to Toronto, who I think people didn't think was a good team, but I think some people are still maybe a little out on. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what would be the line of Toronto phase right now or Toronto optic right now. I know Toronto, Seattle, and we'll talk about that one later. That's about even, right? So I think people are still like, okay, Toronto might be a good team, but like, are they really the best team? And I think, and they're like, oh, they lost 3-1 to Toronto, so maybe Florida's not that good. But at that time, but Toronto won the event. Like Toronto's still a good team. Like if like a middle of the pack team loses to the best team 3-1, that's still a good result. That's not a bad result for that middle of the pack team, right? So that's what I think the argument is. And I think people are like, oh, London was lost a close hard point to Seattle. But Seattle actually struggled a lot in hard point, especially in game one hard points. So that's not really as impressive as it seems. I think they kept I think they lost the search and destroy 6-4, and then I think they lost the control 3-0. So
Mm,
I'm not like, and Seattle did event, like Seattle beat them, and then Seattle beat um they beat them, and then they beat FaZe, and then they beat New York Subliners, and then they lost to Toronto. So I think people are like, Seattle's really good, so therefore you work that back. I don't know. This game should probably be even, but I think I take the experience of Florida more. This London team is actually kind of pretty green, right? I mean, Zero's played. He's not CDL. He's not played the CDL before, but he played before in the CWL, the World League, and you've got him and Afro who are experienced. But at the same time, you've got Afro and you've got Gizmo and you've got
nasty.
Nasty. They are green, right? They're rookies. So questions about how good they are or aren't, right? So um, we honestly don't know, right? They're EU players, right? So we don't know if they're as strong as North American ones or not, right? So that's something we're gonna have to see. But that being said, yeah, there's clear value on Florida here. Florida's a great underdog to bet on. Betting on Florida as an underdog is great because generally they do better than people think they will. But then it's when they're like it's when they're favorites. That's when we start looking the other way. Um, Next game here, and we're gonna kind of repeat the same mantra again a lot of ways here. LAG versus Boston. Um, Now on Bovada, Boston is minus 275. LAG is plus 200. On Bet 365, Boston is minus 334. LAG is plus 240. Um, on um, Bovada, Boston is minus 1.5, minus 135. LAG plus 1.5, plus 105. Over 3.5, minus 300. Under 3.5, plus 220. This price has no basis in reality at all. Like we were talking about the London, Florida price being bad. I have no idea why this price is here. Um, I mean, again, if you follow the same logic, Boston took New York to a game five. Probably shouldn't have. That probably should have ended in four. Because New York had a lead over Boston in that game four, in the game four hardpoint. I believe it was a Berlin hardpoint. I think it was a Berlin hardpoint, and then they just got blown out in game five. LAG, yes, they lost to Florida, but we just said Florida might not be bad, right? It's like these are kind of correlated, right? Like if Florida beats London, then LAG, like Boston, is in trouble here. Do you agree? Does this price make any sense to you at all, or do you think that Boston is a great bet here at minus 275?
Yeah, no. This one maybe is worse than the first game in terms of
Yeah,
just
yeah,
I
I think
can't
so. I
I
think so.
can't justify it. I think you're paying a huge premium on teams that are like getting the CDL fan base excited, right? Like Seattle as an organization has been among the worst for the first 2 years of the CDL, and now they're good, and everyone's like, "Holy crap, they're good." Um, they've got new faces, and it's good to see these players like bounce back, like Accuracy and Mac. They didn't have the best years last year. I think Mac had maybe an underrated year, but Accuracy got benched, right? Sib was just sitting on the Atlanta bench, like someone had to. But he's a really good player. And then Pred comes in from Australia, and people are like, okay, the competition in Australia isn't great. How good is this guy? Turns out he's really good. So with all that being said, like, yes, Seattle's a really good team. We've seen them play 4 matches. Like we got to slow our roll on all of these teams. Honestly, like we cannot overreact to any result really. With that being said, it's important to at least look at the results to see what happened. And yeah, Boston took New York to a game 5. I think people remember that. People don't realize how close, like, it could have been a sweep. I mean, the 2 games Boston wins is a map 2 search that goes to a round 11. So, round 11s are, it's the closest you can win like any kind of map besides like a hard point that goes like 250 to 249, right? Like a 6-5 search, a lot of times it comes down to who's on defense or just who can get the first blood. And that's, we're nitpicking here, but that's not a dominant win by any stretch. Yeah, and then their game 4 win on hardpoint, Berlin, you were right, was 250 to 240. So again, squeakers. Their wins were squeakers. New York won a hard point by 110, and they won their search and destroy by 5 rounds. And the Gavudu control was 3-2 to New York. So that's how they got the win. But yeah, Boston, congrats on getting to a map 5, but we'd like to see a little more out of your wins or keep your losses close. Because, yeah, how much you win by and lose by matters a lot, in my opinion. Because, honestly, we don't get a lot of I mean, we play a lot of maps throughout the entire year, but when you're talking a specific team, like a lot of these teams, we're going to get 20 examples of a control game, throughout the year because you play control once every series, and there's only 20 matches throughout the year besides majors. So, like, yeah, we need the data to dig deeper, so we need to look at how much you're winning by. LAG obviously disappointed as well, losing 3-1. But again, their loss was, I would argue, a little closer. The very first map of the event is a bocage that goes 246, 250. And it was one that LAG maybe should have had. They get to 246. Florida bust in. I want to say it's P3. And they just take it from there. So that one's a bit of a heartbreaker. They lose the search 6-3, so not super close. They pull off a reverse sweep in the control on Tuscan. That was impressive. Like, you're down 0-2 at that point. You're down 0-2 in control. You come back and reverse sweep it. I was thoroughly impressed by that. Now, they couldn't keep it going. They lose the hard point on Berlin, 250 to 162. So, yeah. What we can compare, though, is like you have to ask yourself, is Boston significantly better than the Gorillas? And like, I know scrims are a thing, and Boston has looked relatively good in them throughout the offseason. But I think people are forgetting, like, when LAG announced this roster over the offseason, people were like, oh, A plus offseason from LAG. They improved so much, and now they come out and, maybe they don't look the best in scrims. They lose to Florida in the very first match, and people just throw them aside like, oh, they're not a top 6 team. Can't happen. Like, it's like, hold on, people. We don't know. So yeah, LAG plus, what is it, like 200? Yeah, that's worth betting in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, again, say Boston wins this game, right? And again, this is where you look at the plus 1.5, right? Say we're wrong and Boston wins this game. I mean, sure, but can Boston win at 3-1? Sure, of course they can. But you're laying 130 minus 135 for that. That's insane. My take on that is these two teams are equal, right? These are basically
Yeah.
equivalent teams, and one of them, if I bet $1 on, I get $2 back, and the other one I have to bet almost $3 to get $1 back. So I know which one I'm picking, right? That's how value works in betting. Um, Also, LAG minus 1.5 plus 500 plus 475 on Bovada.
Wow.
Tempting. That's tempting to put a little something on there. That's fine. A couple bucks on that. That's not bad. No, I mean that's the thing, right? And we try to find value here. You made an interesting point about the offseason, right? Because I remember all those people like LEG is so good, and at the time I was like, yeah, but like someone has to be the worst team though, right? Like just because their team got better, if everybody else's team was still way better anyways, like there's different levels to this. Like some like does this make them the best team? No. Does this make them maybe like the sixth or seventh or eighth best team? Possibly. Someone has to be like someone has like not everybody's just going to be a top four team. But then yeah, basically after that match, people are like, oh no, LEG's done. They're going to be the first one to make a team change. And now I'm kind of like I saw that and I was like maybe I thought that for a day or so. But now I'm thinking back to it and I'm like, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe this team isn't like that performance against Florida was not horrible. Like London's performance against Seattle was much worse. Um like there was teams who did a lot worse than LAG did. And again, this is a team that's starting out. These guys have never really worked together before, right? Like you're looking at Gunless, Asim, Slasher, Gunless, Slasher probably never worked together before. You've got Hook in there too. There's a lot of like people who are on like comeback stories, right? Like I think what half the team's on a comeback story at this point. Actually, all of them are. I think pretty much. They're pretty much all comeback stories, right? So like no, like plus 240 is ridiculous. This Boston team has not shown us that it can do it, right? And like people are going to be like, "Oh, Cap Siddles." Like, well, okay, but TJ, right? Like this is the thing. Like there are some good elements to this Boston team and I think it could be good long term. Like I like methods. I'm liking Cap Siddle. Nero did not do a ton and neither did TJ. So, like again, this Boston team might be the first team to go through some team changes here. But we'll have to see. Next up, this is the last match on Friday. This is happening at 1800 hours, which is 6 o'clock. New York Subliner versus Seattle. New York plus 175. Seattle minus 250. On Bet365, I got minus 120, minus 120 on the on on the spreads. So plus 1.5 for New York's minus 120, minus 1.5 for Seattle's minus 120. Over 4.5 is plus 175. Under 4.5 is minus 250. On Bovada, it's similar except it's plus 136 on the money line. Everything is similar, but more towards slightly more towards the subliners. Um, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this team is like the thing of it is, and I think this is the important thing to gain from this, is that like there is a strong case to be made that this week you should just bet on every underdog. There's a relatively
Yeah.
you can make that argument really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Seattle comes out hot and they shock the world. They get to the finals and then lose the finals to Toronto. And like in what could have been a 3-0, Toronto did pretty well in game one. They kind of fell out a bit, but then Toronto comes back and immediately 3-0 like 3-0s them after game one, right? They win the surge control, and then the last hard point was just a demolition basically of Seattle. I'm tempted to start fading the Seattle team, like especially on the control, right? Because control was very clearly their best map and mode. Basically they won every control 3-0 until they lost to control 3-2 to Toronto. And the thing is, control is this kind of mixed blend of mode where it's half slaying, half strategy. So it's why it's a perfect kind of blend of hardpoint and search and destroy. And the thing of it is the Seattle team also struggled in a couple of the hard points. Like the reason they lost games at all was because of they won the searches, but then they lost some hard points in there. My concern is that is this Seattle team just ahead of the game in terms of tactics? And once people catch up to the tactics, then this team's going to have problems because they can't slay. That's my concern. And the fact that they're the best in control, which initially, when you start the game, it's mostly tactics, and then as it progresses, then it becomes a lot. Everybody develops the same tactics, so it becomes much more slaying. That's my concern. What do you think about that? Do you think that this people are going to start figuring out the Seattle team? Are they a one trick pony here, or do you think they're strong enough in the slaying department to keep up the pace?
I think they're strong enough. Yeah, I think the big question, and this is something we talked about a couple weeks ago, was could the vets on Seattle have a bounce back year? Or maybe a better way of phrasing that is, are they going to maybe turn back the clock? Like, can Mac look like he did when he played Modern Warfare on subliners, funny enough? And can accuracy look as like accuracy? I think people forget had a pretty good year on Modern Warfare 2 years ago. Again, playing for New York, so maybe a revenge match that we missed out on at the kickoff. Uh, and yeah, they do. They look better in this kind of quick, like very fast-paced type of game, as opposed to Cold War, which was a little bit slower paced, I'd say. So maybe there's something to they play better in a more chaotic environment. Um, and Sib and Pred are looking to show that they belong, and that's maybe just a perfect blend of what you need. And New York, I think, is in a similar boat. Like you have a couple vets who have been there and have won, and like they're just always going to be on good teams. You've got Hydra, who popped off in the time that he played last year, and Neptune, who again was like maybe Florida Mutineers' best player. I know Awakening and Skies put up some stats too, but watching Neptune play, you could tell like at least in Search and Destroy, like the kid is smart. Like he knows where to be at all times. So you've got two really good teams. I think everyone knows that. The prices, I mean, we saw Seattle beat New York in a 3-1 on Sunday at the kickoff. So does that happen again? I would think that's the most likely scenario, but because we've seen a lot of map from these teams, this is a match that I kind of want to stay away from. Again, if you're going to make me pick, I think, yeah, I'd rather take the subliners. I don't know if I'd like money line or the map spread more. But if you're going to make me pick, I'll pick them and just say what goes around comes around. This game is very mixy. It's going to be hard for the best team to stay on top. Not saying this Seattle's the best team. Just saying, like, we might have a lot of power ranking shuffling just week to week if, teams get hot or if a new meta comes in and teams take advantage of that. So, this is one I'd stay away from. Again, I think Seattle should be the favorite. They are. This is the first line that at least makes some sense to me. So I think I'll just probably sit back, relax, and enjoy this one because I think we're going to get another good one. But just digging deeper into the match they played against each other, uh, first hard point on Gavutu was very close, 250 to 233. New York pulled off the win. On a map that we saw some pretty big blowouts on. I think people are thinking Gavutu is going to be a lot like Checkmate last year, where if you can chain, it's a bigger map, more AR dominant, and if you can chain hills together and hold them, like you could have 100-point leads a lot, as opposed to like Bocage, where it's just super chaotic and you're just flying in at all times. Then the rest of it went, yeah, Search and Destroy 6-3 in Seattle's favor on Berlin. That's an impressive win, an easy win. The Control on Gavutu, they win 3-0. Again, I talked about that earlier. It was one attack win, and then they held their defense in rounds 1 and 3. And then the hard point on Tuscan, again, a pretty close match, but won with relative ease, 250 to 200. Um, so yeah, it was a convincing win. I would say that proved that Seattle is the better team. Um, should you lay, 175, 200, whatever it is in that range, come match time? Nah, I really wouldn't. So, yeah, maybe the first match where all makes sense in the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of do. I agree. Probably want to stay away from this money line. Maybe if this goes more towards the surge, I'd consider it more. But I am kind of eyeing that plus 1.5, and I'm not seeing it as bad. This is kind of where you can maybe start playing with some of your game spreads here, right? Because again, um I'm just looking at Bovada here. Um like New York subliners, like game map 1 plus 18.5 points, minus 115. That's not bad. It's not great, it's not bad. Um I don't know, minus 1.5 in the search, plus 1.5, minus 170. It's not great. I kind of wish there was a bit more, but I think this game kind of feels like this goes to 5. I think the subliners win it. Because the subliners, I think, are going to be a team that I'm going to find myself betting on a lot this year. I think they're just a solid team of veterans that knows what they're doing. And I think I'm going to find myself going on them a lot. And I think that's I think they're just good value at times. I really do, and I think I'm going to find myself on them a lot because I think they're a team that's going to get discounted. But the fact that you have Hydra in there and the other stuff, and the other thing is that if Neptune, because Neptune did underperform a little bit in the classic in the kickoff, if he does keep underperforming, Like I'm very confident you're going to see Clay and Krim come up to be like, yeah, no, no, you're gone. And like that's something that he's going to be able to keep them on their toes. And I think that's a kind of that's an important factor to have in this. I think so. I think I think we're gonna see a lot of value in New York as the season goes on of just this team of just solid veterans. Um, Interesting to bring up Phase here because now we are talking about Atlanta Phase. This is a really interesting case because we actually have a better price on Bovada. Basically on Bet365, Phase is minus 3,300 to Paris is plus 900. On Bovada, it's minus 3,300 plus 1,000, so you're getting an extra plus 100 betting on Paris on Bovada. So this is actually a minus 2.5 spread. Minus 2.5 for Phase, minus 125. So you're paying minus 125 for a sweep versus Paris plus 2.5 is minus 110. Over 3.5 is plus 100. Under 3.5 is minus 138. Man, that's so the price is literally so I just realized the over 3.5 and the plus 2.5. So they're basically saying that there's only like a 10 vig that Paris 3-0s Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah. I think
That's
we can find.
hilarious.
I think we can find the Paris. Yeah, Paris to 3-0 is 33 to 1. To win 3-1, these are exact outcomes. So 3-0 for Paris, 33 to 1. To win in 4 maps, it's 35 to 1. So they actually think it's more likely they sweep than win in 4 maps. And then to win in 5 maps, 19 to 1. If you like any of that. Yeah, this will be the one time we see these two teams face off. I think the CDL made it like that. Like they're like, okay, when we're putting this schedule together, let's get these really crappy games out of the way. Let's just like we don't want to have to deal with these anymore. Um, and yeah, this will be the one time they play all year unless they somehow meet in a major. But again, with how Paris is looking, I doubt that we get that. Um, yeah, so the one question is, do you think phase sweep? That's the one I think bettable thing you could pick. You're not gonna lay minus 3,300.
No.
Um, yeah, so it's do phase get it done in 3 maps, or can Paris take one of those first three? Um, I mean, ugh, I don't know. Like, gut says because right, we only have one match for both of these teams. They both lost 3-1. FaZe looked better in their 3-1, and it was to a better team. Um, and yeah, I kind of do think they'll come out and just say, "All right, it's the regular season. Let's take care of business. Let's take out Paris." So, uh, do I want to lay 130 for that? Maybe. Like I'm still a believer in FaZe. I do think they'll bounce back. Simp didn't look great. Abizi didn't look great. It was really Celium. He was kind of the only guy who had a good series. Arcides did okay as well. But Paris, I mean, they did win a control against Thieves in their round one matchup, 3-2. So it was about as close as you could get. Yeah, otherwise it was ugly from Paris. A Gavutu loss, 250 to 214. I mean, they kind of kept that one close. Search and Destroy was a 6-1 loss on Desert Siege. That's brutal. And then a Tuscan loss, 250 to 138. So, yeah, it wasn't pretty. I don't know. There's not a lot to say about this other than, do you believe in a big phase bounce back? I kind of do. So I would kind of lean with the minus 130 for them to sweep. But I mean, I just don't know what you could say about Paris. Like, other than they're a huge underdog and they know it, so they're gonna maybe come out hot and try to take a map. Um, I don't. Yeah, I can't do it. I can't.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I made this argument kind of before, but never really talked about it. You can make an argument to bet on every single underdog this week. And like I know this is the one where it really stretches credibility. But like there's an argument to bet on Paris. I don't love it. It's terrifying. This is not like a yes, I feel good betting on Paris, but like technically we don't know about this much about this phase team, right? I mean, again, by any if you just start if you run an elo, you run my elo model from the beginning of this year. Phase is like the sixth best team. Now Paris is like one of the worst teams, so there's still some variance there. But at the same time, though, like 10 to 1, 10 to 1 to phase, like 10 to 1 for a team to beat another team in Call of Duty.
You're saying you would rather take a money line than plus 2.5.
No, I think if you're betting this, I think Paris can win a game. That being said, don't mess with any of the game spreads. Like the first game spread is minus 55.5 points. Like yeah, Paris phase could easily cover that, right? Like Paris could win like the first game like 250 to 100, right? So like it's really hard to see this. I don't know, like I don't think we know. Like I don't want to be laying minus 2.5 to on phase, and then Paris just wins game one, and then you're like, well, that's it, right? It's done now, right? Like that's the thing, and is that going to happen? Probably not. But like Paris is just like Paris was probably going to get 3-0'd by Thieves, and they somehow didn't get 3-0'd by Thieves. So like on it, maybe Paris like can Paris squeak out like a control or something and then not get 3-0? Yeah, I kind of think they can actually. Like I don't love laying a minus 130. I don't love laying anything on this. I
I'll
mean,
tell you, if you think Atlanta win in exactly 4 maps, it's about plus 166 is what I'm seeing. That's not a horrible play. Like I can't see it going 5 maps. If you think FaZe win in 5, it's plus 650. But again,
see, this is the thing, right? Like
I can't get that far.
I think it's even, right? Like I think it's 50-50 as to whether or not Paris win a map, right? And like cuz I could see a brutal swift 3-0. I can really see that. At the same time, I could see a scenario where like Paris win a map, and then you're just stuck there with like a minus 130 ticket with no other outs, and you're just like what if I don't know? It's like the thing is we haven't talked a lot about phase yet, and we're gonna try to talk about them more with the next game because I don't want to spend so long talking about Paris. I mean, how dominant is this phase team like the same team from a year ago, or have they taken a bit of a step back? Now a lot of this is going to determine on how Seattle does, right? Because if Seattle loses to New York, that suggests that Seattle that phase might have taken a little bit of a step back. Now again, it's not definitive either way, but like was phase caught cold? Were they unprepared? They said they were prepared, right? Like they said they'd been scrimming and doing all this stuff. They seemed like they knew everything cold. They're like, give us Toronto, and then they lose to Seattle. Is there some sort of thing where they lose to like? Because remember they lost to Seattle in Major Five, right? Is it does Seattle somehow have their number even though it's a completely different team with completely different management? I don't know, right? Like there is some stuff about this. Now remember Sib also used to play on Face, so it's possible that Sib had their number too, right? Because Sib it was a revenge match for Sib. So that's a possible angle there as well. I don't know. I'd rather take what they probably will 3-0 them, but like if I'd probably rather take the Paris plus 2.5 because then you have so many more outs to it because it's just like if phase is up 2-0 and they just take their foot off the gas into control, then like you cash that rather than phase is up and like maybe there's just a weird break or something and they're just kind of like whatever we'll take them out on the hard point, right? So I don't know. I'm it's debatable for me. I'd rather bet the plus two. I may not touch this honestly. This is just
I'm
ugly.
not.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
probably
not.
not going to touch this. I'm not touching any. If that plus 2.5 gets up to like plus something else, like if that gets to like plus 150, maybe I take a swing at it. But at even, no, I'm not taking it at even. That's a little too much for me. 4:30 game. This is on Saturday now. So that was the phase Paris game is the first game on Saturday. Second game on Saturday, Ravens versus Optic. London is plus 295 on the money line. Optic is minus 435. Um, London plus 1.5 plus 125. Optic minus 1.5 minus 165. Over 3.5 minus 225. Under 3.5 plus 170. again, we don't. These are two other teams that only played one game each, right? London played a game, Optic played a game. It's hard to like. Part of me said, like, again, you should be just taking underdogs this week because we have so little information about these teams. But at the same time, this just so feels to me, and I'll ask you this I'll throw this to you in a second. But does this not just feel like an Optic 3-0 to you? Like, this just to me screams Optic comes in, they're strong, they just completely dominate en route to a 3-0. What do you see that here or not?
Yeah, like playing it out in my head, that is an outcome that seems likely. I will say London do get a warm up match the day before against Florida. So, for what that's worth, that's something. I think you'd rather go in with a little bit of online experience than none. Um, yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing: all of these matches where there's huge mismatches, like the last game we talked about, FaZe in Paris. This one I think is one still, despite Optic losing at the kickoff. Like they played a good team, they lost close, which is encouraging still. In the control, they won 3-1, which was impressive to say the very least. Like control, right? There's only 5 rounds to work with, but they won pretty dominantly, winning 3-1 on Kavutu. So, yeah, again, this is one I struggle with. I always think you're paying an inflated price with Optic. But again, London didn't show me much at the kickoff. It's tough. I mean, this is a match I would wait on just to see how the London Florida one goes. Because I actually don't think the price will move much. Like, say London do come out and beat Florida and look pretty good. Like, I don't think people are going to be like, oh, let's go on London versus Optic tomorrow. Like, I feel like Optics is just, they're still going to be the more likable side. So I would just wait if London show you some signs of improvement against Florida the day before and win, in a somewhat convincing manner. And that price on this match doesn't move, then maybe you can talk me into London. But at the moment, I really don't have any interest in either the spread, the money line, any of the maps. But yeah, again, you mentioned it, like Optic 3-0, that coming off a very disappointing kickoff performance. Like, yeah, I can definitely see that happening. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I might also pass on this game. I don't love this either. Optic probably wins it, but to what degree I don't know. I'm not loving this either way. I think this is I think Optic probably wins this, but then they have another match, and we'll talk about that match in just a second here. And I think they'll do worse in that match than this match. Um, but yeah, I mean, to me, this is going to depend a lot on what happens in that first game, right? If um, if London win against that, then London's odds will go up in this game. They'll probably close at like plus 250 or something. But if Florida wins, then this London price will go to like plus 400, as it probably should. And at that point, then you lose the value on the -1.5 or the -2.5, right? So it's debatable as to whether you want to bet that now or not. Um, Last game, actually, sorry, second last game on Saturday. We gotta get used to there's 4 games on Saturday, not 3 games on Saturday anymore. Seattle Surge versus Toronto Ultra. Seattle's plus 102. Toronto is -135. Seattle plus 1.5, -220. Toronto -1.5, plus 165. The over and the under are blocked out for some reason, but the over 4.5 was plus 155. The under 4.5 was -205. I like the -1.5 Toronto in this game. Um, what about you? I like Toronto. I like money line. I like the spread. I might like a couple of game spreads too as well. What do you think here? Do you like Toronto or do you think this is going to be a closer game?
Yeah, again, it's a tough one to call. Another one where one of the teams has a warm up match. So Seattle plays New York the day before. We talked about that one already. I don't really love either side of that New York Seattle game. So it's tough to like, justify taking one of the like Seattle or Toronto right now, unless I feel strongly that like Seattle are going to come out and beat down New York again and maybe give Toronto a better fight this time around. But um, yeah, we'll wait and see. I mean, Toronto took care of business against them in the final, winning 3-1. And it was pretty dominant. I mean, especially that last map. So map one, 250 to 203 to Seattle on Bocage. Um, Not Toronto's best hardpoint map. They lost that same map to Thieves the series before. So maybe they ban Bocage this time around. But after that, Toronto a 6-4 Tuscan Search and Destroy, a 3-2 Tuscan Control, and then an absolute blowout 250 to 71 on Berlin to close things out. So yeah, it's a question of can Toronto keep this up, or can Seattle get one back? Again, I think the price is about right. I think obviously Toronto should be favored. If you're gonna make me pick, yeah, the -1.5 at +165 looks very enticing. Um, Toronto again, Bocage hardpoint seems to be the one thing bugging them. If they decide to ban that, assuming they'll get first veto, you ban that, I think you're looking at a good series for the Ultra. So I think right now, yeah, slight lean to Toronto. I have them as the best team in the game. Seattle looked good at the kickoff, but again, I'm not quite sure if Seattle's on the same like tier of teams as Toronto. Right now, how I played out in my head is Toronto. Again, I still think Atlanta's in that top tier despite their loss to Seattle, but like just what we saw all last year just holds too much value to me. And then based on what people are saying, Optic should be competing with them, maybe. But Seattle, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. If they take out New York again and again in a convincing manner, like, I mean, are they going to be favorites in this game? I don't think it would move that much.
They might be. If it's another 3-1 or close, almost 3-0, maybe.
Yeah, I just don't know how many people are going to justify, like, oh, Seattle look hot. Now they're favorites over Toronto after losing pretty handily to them. So maybe the best way to play it is either bet Toronto now or, yeah, if you think New York take out Seattle this time around, but you think Seattle can maybe bounce back the next day, you get an inflated price with the surge that might be inflated in a good way. I mean, like a plus 105 might turn into like a plus 120. You might get a little bit of value there. So I kind of just like the pivot off of however the first game goes. If Seattle looks really good and their price drops, really go on Toronto. If Seattle look not so good, maybe bet that they bounce back the next day.
Well, I will say that right now on Bet365, Seattle is down or up to, I guess, -1. They're down to -110. So this is basically even. It's Seattle -110, Toronto -125. So yeah, that's an interesting kind of line. And again, I think yeah, if Seattle were to beat New York, but then that on the flip side though, New York beats Seattle, that -1.5 plus 165 is gone, right? Then all
Yeah.
of a sudden that becomes like the -1.5 becomes like a plus 120 or something, right? So again, it's not bad, but it's not as great as plus 162. Last game on Saturday is New York Subliners versus Los Angeles LAG, Los Angeles Gorillas. Somehow this line is very similar to the Boston LAG line. On Bovada, -135 for subliners, plus 240 for LAG. On Bet365, it's -400 to plus 275. -1.5, -150, +1.5, +115 for LAG. Over 4.5, +180. Under 4.5, -240. Again, this is kind of one where, again, like if the Gorillas beat if they beat Boston, like again, they could all be in kind of that middle tier of the league, right? Like the probably like the 5, 6, 7, 8 spots. Those are probably all going to kind of blend together. And like again, should subliners be favored in this game? Yes. Should they be favored by this much in this game? No, right? And like LAG, like the subliners put down Boston in 3-2. Should have been probably 3-1, possibly even like 3-0. But they did take them to five. Then they 3-0 Minnesota, which I think has people really low in Minnesota. But like, and then they lose to Seattle. But again, we don't know where Seattle is either, right? Like again, there's a scenario where like subliners beat Seattle, like LAG beats Boston, subliners beat Seattle. This price stays basically the same. Seattle gets crushed by Toronto, and then LAG beats the subliners, and then we're sitting as here's like, okay, Toronto's one of the best teams, Seattle is not one of the best teams, but then somehow you've got the Gorillas are actually up there in that tier that maybe like this would the LEG be even better than Seattle, right? So like I kind of feel like a huge amount of this price, probably at least 100 points of this price, at least 100 points, are just kind of the stink on LAG. And I don't know. I see value in LAG in this game and in this price. It's probably crazy. Probably going to lose. And again, it depends. It's going to depend on what that first game is. But like, I kind of see value in the Gorillas here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's still value. I mean, if there's value on them in the first game, there's probably value on them here. Yeah, I agree completely. Just think about this for a sec. So what I'm seeing here, LAG against Boston, first match. Their plus 1.5 price is plus 105. Their plus 1.5 price versus New York is plus 115. Say you just bet both of those and nothing else. You don't even need them to win a match. Like, and you're like, you just need them to get to one map five this weekend against two teams who are solid. Like, New York looks like a good team and Boston looked fine. Like, yeah, it's just this whole year, I think we're going to have a lot of, again, like I said, power rankings getting shuffled around like crazy. It looks like there's a pretty good competitive balance this year, whereas last year it was FaZe versus the world. And a lot of times the world meant Toronto or maybe New York or maybe Dallas. But it was FaZe. Like, it was FaZe versus everybody else. This year you're going to have a cluster of teams. Like, maybe we'll have a cluster at the top and a cluster in the middle and a cluster at the bottom, but we're going to have more competitive balance. So I think, like, betting wise, you just you buy low on teams. Like, it's the same thing you do in other leagues where there's constant games, like in the NFL or NBA or MLB. Like, it hurts when you're like, you know, betting some team who hasn't looked good in a couple weeks. But like, the value on the line or whatever you decide to bet is just it all comes around. Like, teams aren't going to lose forever or win forever or cover for forever or not cover for forever. Like, it all comes back around. And I think LAG, according to these odds, like, apparently they're in a horrible situation right now. Like, this is a huge buy low opportunity. And it might all go away, yeah, if LAG bounce back and beat Boston, who is a team that CDL fans have a lot, like, they're a high visibility team because they stream their scrims a lot. They come out in their series versus New York and like the crowd goes nuts and like seemed like they wanted Boston to win. Um so yeah, like, LAG I think are just this already forgotten team. Um and yeah, I kind of think they'll take one of their matches this weekend, either against Boston or against New York, or heck, maybe they shock the world and take both. But um, yeah, I just a lot. Here's one other way you could play it: if Boston win, which the odds suggest they will against LAG, and if New York can pull off a slight upset and beat Seattle, like, what does this New York versus LAG price get to? Like, it's gonna be astronomical. So like, that might be like a double down situation for me at least. But yeah, again, it's just New York stock is a little high, and LAG's is just horribly low. So give me LAG.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of this is just LAG has been the worst team or one of the worst teams in the league for the last 2 years. right?
Yeah.
It would be like if suddenly the Detroit Lions just like had an entire new team, right? And then they're like, oh, maybe they're good now, but they're still going to get amazing prices on them because no one's going to want to bet on them. And like, do I think that suddenly this LAG team is a top four team? No, but do I think they're like top eight, maybe top six? Yeah, they could be. And like this is the thing, right? Like you're getting such a good price, you don't have to bet the farm on these. Like you can say like, okay, fine, like bet 2 units on the plus 1.5, a unit on the money line, and then you're like, cool, right? We're good, right? So like I kind of think this year, in terms of tiers, for at least what we're seeing so far, and again, I don't know yet. I could be wrong about this. I think we're going to see like kind of three kind of clear tiers. You're going to have the top 4 or 5 teams. They're going to be tier one, and that's what we're looking at right now. You're looking at Toronto, Atlanta, probably Optic, Thieves, maybe Seattle's in there too, depending. Then you're going to have this other middle tier, which is going to be really mixy. And that's where you're going to have your subliners, your gorillas, maybe Boston, maybe Florida, maybe,
Rocker.
yep, maybe Rocker, maybe Boston. Like maybe London. It's going to be a really mixy bunch. And then you're going to have your bottom tier, which is going to be Paris, probably, unless they shock the world. It's gonna be like Paris, and then whoever the worst team is after Paris, and whether or not that's gonna be LAG or that could be LAG, that could be Boston, right? That
It could be just Paris.
could be, yeah.
Like,
Paris could just be the
that's
worst team. Could be London there too. Could be London,
yeah,
like Paris 12, London 11, right? But I think that middle tier, I think we're probably like specifically matches in that middle tier. Like when we're probably gonna get games where like a team at the lower end of the middle tier is like plus 300 against a team at the upper tier of the middle tier. And I think that's we're gonna get insane value on betting that tier, the team in that bottom and that middle tier.
absolutely.
Like I
Yeah.
think that's going to be a lot of this year, and also the same thing in the upper tier, right? And we're actually 2 games away from one of those matchups right now. But that's I think the point is that we're going to see insane value on some of those games. Moving on, moving on to Sunday, we've got 3 games on Sunday. The 3 o'clock game on Sunday. Paris versus Florida. Paris is plus 250 on the money line. Florida is minus 350. Paris plus 1.5, plus 150. Florida minus 1.5, minus 135. Over 4.5 plus 180. Under 4.5 minus 240. Again, this seems like a low price. Minus 135 is actually kind of low to bet on Florida to get a 3-1 or 3-0. I kind of like that. Maybe you look at some game spreads here. Let's see what's the first game. Minus 28.5 against Paris. That seems pretty fun. I like that. Florida minus 1.5, minus 125. That's pretty cool for game two. Um, yeah, you might want to bet on some game spreads in here. What do you think? What do you think about this game?
Yeah, I don't hate the search one. Of all the teams last week, Florida's search and destroy looked best. I think that's clear. They only played 2 games, granted, but clean overall. I think they played 2 Berlins, so maybe it's just one map that they're dominant at. But Paris's was horrible, so that's a humongous mismatch, at least from the small sample size we have. Um, I think Paris, and let's look at Control, right? It was Paris's 1 map win. Control against a solid LA Thieves team. Um, Granted, how good is their Control? Thieves then lost to Texas on Tuscan before bouncing back and beating Toronto on Tuscan. So, maybe a middle of the pack Control team with the Thieves. But yeah, this one, again, I think if you're going to take this now, you take Florida now because, right, the first match we talked about, Florida should be a bigger favorite over London. For whatever reason, they're not. So, yeah, if I think Florida win that first match, which I expect that they should, then I think this price only goes up because I really can't see Paris. Like, what does Paris have to do to impress you for their number to drop? Like, take Atlanta to a map 5, I guess? Like, would you even be impressed if Paris get to a map 4? I guess it depends on how they look map by map, but I think this Florida number only goes up. So I kind of think take Florida now if you want them. again, it's tough though if London come out and beat Florida, right? Maybe there you get that inflated price with Florida. So it all really depends on what you think that first match on Friday is going to be like. We tend to think Florida should take care of business versus London. Um, but yeah, it's also a bet on, is Paris a scrappy team? Even though they're the worst team, it doesn't mean they can't take teams to the brink or at least close to that. Um, it's just, yeah, I know we're trying to make a case for underdogs here, but again, I could take Paris if that number keeps going up. Um, but I mean, I don't know. I just I don't know what number it'd have to get to for me to be like, you know what, that's a good number on Paris. Like we talked about the 10-1 against Atlanta. To me, that's not even close to what, like, I want like a 20-1 maybe, because a 10-1 implies that there's like a 10-ish% chance that Paris beat Atlanta. And to me, that's like way too high. Um, and yeah, so like Paris versus Florida, like just thinking about it in my head, maybe they win the match a quarter of the time. So plus 300 we'd have to get to, which I guess they're not too far off from, but um again, just these series are tough. Just I'm glad there's 12 CDL teams, but like man, if the 12th one is going to be bad just throughout the year. I'm hoping they're not. That's the thing. Is I'm hoping Paris is a competitive team. I don't want there to be that tier of just bad teams at the bottom. I'd rather we have good teams and a bunch of contenders, but I worry a lot about Paris. Now, again, we can kind of circle back and say, well, we've seen two matches from Florida. They looked okay. It's only two matches. A lot of people thought they'd be a bottom of the barrel team. Now they're minus 350. I guess that's your case for Paris, but I think I'd rather lay the 1.5 minus 135. I think that makes some sense. But again, one I might wait for, or just forget about.
Yeah, I get that here. I don't know. You could probably play this market a lot better and like because I don't think this is gonna move that much. Like I'd be even if Florida beats London, I don't think you're looking at this is probably not gonna balloon out to like minus. It's probably not gonna balloon out to like minus 500 for Florida. And then you could still probably play individual game spreads too, so it's not that bad. Um, I don't know. I would say that this is yeah. Paris is probably bad, but the thing is, you have to realize that like this Paris team was designed to be not good, right? Like this wasn't like, oh, we're gonna get like last year when LAG was bad, they tried to sign a team that had won the Call of Duty World Championship, right? Like they're like, cool, let's get that team, which is not a great logic, but like it'd be like trying to re-sign like a football team that won the Super Bowl 5 years ago, but you didn't account for the fact that they're 5 years older and like injured and aged and different. Whatever, that's the
Yeah.
point. But it's not a horrible strategy. But at the same time, like for this is like a bunch of bench players, and like we're not talking like people who were like Asim was almost benched due to conflicts. Slasher was benched because he was doing a bit bad. Gunless was actually playing, and then Hook was benched due to kind of weird player reasons, even though he was kind of still good. Like they were all kind of benched for weird circumstances. These are players who were benched for reasons of like not being good, right? Like
Yeah.
outside of Temp, like John what got on the team because they had no one else. Um, Fellow got benched because he was brought in to replace Hook and then got benched because he was bad. Decimate was a bench player who came in randomly at times, but that was like he was like a sub level player, right? So again, it's not this is not a great caliber of things, and like but again, they could be mixy. I think Paris, like we're probably getting to the point now where we're gonna start underestimating Paris. I just don't think we're there yet. Right? Like it's only a matter of time before Paris is like plus 1,000 against like I don't know, Boston or something. Right? And like
Yeah.
that's when you start. That's when you look at Paris and you're like, okay, that's when you start striking, right? Because the thing of it is, these are not NFL markets, right? Like there's like even with the Lions last year, who are probably the worst, were supposed to be the worst team in the league. It turned out to be the Jaguars, but even with the Lions, you never got like amazing spreads. Like you never got like, oh, plus 20 points. Like you never got that. You got like, you get plus 10 a couple times, but you never got like insanely high spreads or insanely high numbers. But here, these markets are a lot more driven by money. And especially when you're looking at like Boston, and some of these teams are really public teams. Like if Boston plays Paris and they're doing okay, there's going to be a ton of money on Boston. Or even like if Optic is not doing great, and there's going to be value on Paris at some point. It's just there's no value on Paris right this week. Probably not,
Yeah,
but we could be
I
wrong.
guess a good way of thinking about it, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I think everyone knows Paris is the worst team in the league. So all you have to really consider in their matchups are like, what do you think of the other team? Like, if you're high on Florida, say right now you think Florida is the sixth or seventh best team in the league, then like bet Florida. If you think they're still closer to like 10th or 11th, then maybe take Paris. Like, it's always going to be the case. It's kind of the same thing with like the best teams in the league. Like, everyone, if there's a clear best team or two in the league, like last year with FaZe, like the matchups where FaZe was playing, like in 2021 at least, you were never like, oh, FaZe look really good, I'm gonna bet them. It's like, well, they always look good. It's like, what do you think of the other team? Is the other team undervalued or overvalued? That's kind of how you handicap those types of games where you've got the best or the worst teams in the league. So, yeah, unless Paris somehow like win a couple matches in a row and people are like, "Hey, now Paris is okay," then you might come back and go, "Actually, they're not," and bet against them. But again, early in the year, it's going to be tough to really decipher that until we get more matches actually played. So, um, yeah, but I'm kind of the belief that Florida are an undervalued team right now.
At
So,
least this week. Yeah.
yeah, at least this week. Yeah, their first two matches, I mean, you can't ask for two better ones. I think London and then Paris 2 days later. So, Florida could come out 2-0, and people are like, "Oh my goodness, are Florida a top four, top five team?" Then the following week, that might be a time where, oh, people are buying high on Florida. I will sell high. So it's that type of do-si do kind of you got to do all year, which is um, tough but fun to say the least.
Yeah. Um. Next up, so we got two matches left on the weekend. Sunday afternoon. What time is it? It is 4:30. FaZe versus Thieves. On Bovada, it is FaZe minus 325, Thieves plus 230. On Bet365, I got Thieves minus 400. Sorry, FaZe minus 400, Thieves plus 275. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 163. Thieves plus 1.5, plus 120. Plus 120 on Thieves. It's the plus 1.5 is plus 110 on Bovada. Over 3.5 minus 225. Under 3.5 plus 162. Um, I really like Thieves here. Um, the thing of it is, I was originally a little low on this Thieves team, but like last week they really impressed me. I just don't see like I really because what a plus 300 implies what 33% chance
25.
of 300, yeah, 25% chance. So like Thieves have a more than 25% chance of winning this game. Also, Thieves plus 1.5. Like I think Thieves are probably quite possibly the best hardpoint team in the league. They should have beat Toronto. Like again, and there was a crazy moment at the end of that game four where it was on the Tuscan hardpoint where Toronto was eating up the junk time off of the one hard point, and they're transitioning to the other hard point, which is kind of in that grassy area with the fire. And Thieves went into that hard point. They were on the rotation. They killed all the Toronto players. There was no Toronto players anywhere near them, and Thieves were in the hard point. And they only needed like 10 seconds left, and somehow they lost. And it is insane that that even happened. Because again, imagine how different the world would be if Thieves had just closed out 10 seconds on that hard point. They don't go to Game 5, so Thieves beat Toronto 3-1. Then Thieves play Seattle. Thieves could have won that game. Definitely could have won that match against Seattle. And then what's the price here? What's the price here if Thieves hold on for 10 more seconds against Ultra in that hard point? What's the price? Is this plus 150? Is this even? Like what? Like this is insane because this is actually this originally the plus 150 was the plus 1.5 was actually even a couple days ago. Is now up to plus 120. I want to get involved. I got involved again earlier. I'm going to get involved again. This is a bad price. I think Thieves are definitely one of the top four teams in the league, and we don't know how good Atlanta is or isn't right now. So I'm on Thieves here. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also like the plus 1.5 more than the money line, just because when you're talking minus 1.5, plus 1.5, you're really looking at hard point, and Thieves were very solid. Now, granted, FaZe did take a hard point as well in their 3-1 loss. Um, but yeah, Thieves went 5-1 in the kickoff in hard point. 1-0 on Bocage, 2-0 on Gavudu, and 2-1 on Tuscan. They did not play Berlin. And then FaZe won their opening Bocage, lost on Tuscan. So both teams have losses on Tuscan and wins on Bocage. Um, yeah, I think that plus 1.5 at plus money it makes a lot of sense. Because if Thieves can just win those hard points, then there you go. They got to a map 5. If they can take one of those and then squeak out a search, take the control, like Atlanta didn't look great at either of those modes. Like not what they looked like last year. Um, and I don't know, maybe people just need some warming up to Thieves. We talked about them before the kickoff. I said, like, this team, I think, this is the roster that is going to stick for a while. They vibe well. Like, you just watched them. Kenny is just laughing half the time they were playing Optic. It's just, yeah, it's a fun team to root for. I like them a lot. I'd like to see Atlanta like lose. I think a lot of people would like that. FaZe are the equivalent of like, I don't know, the Tom Brady Patriots dynasty at this point. Like they just win and win and win and win, and they just keep winning. So to see them go down, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. Um, yeah, I don't know where this price is going to go because obviously Atlanta should beat Paris easily. I don't think like a 3-0 for FaZe is going to change the number at all. And Thieves don't play until this match. So this number should stay put unless for some reason Paris are really scrappy against FaZe. Maybe the number falls a little bit from them, but um, yeah, FaZe. I can't get behind right now. I know it was just one match, but yeah, this game looks very mixy, and yeah, I think Thieves are a good vibey team that can at least get to a map 5, if not win outright. So um, I'll lean Thieves, but we'll see if I actually put anything on it. I might just sit back and relax and watch this one. I know a lot of the good matches I say that for, but like I don't know. These lines for these like showcase matches um, are pretty well drilled into, I think, already. So um, yeah, that's what I got to say about that. Thieves or nothing, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, Last game of the weekend here. Minnesota versus Optic. Minnesota will go the Bovada price here. Plus 350 for Minnesota, minus 550 for Optic. Minnesota plus 2.5, minus 220. Optic Texas minus 2.5 plus 165. On Bet365, you can get the Minnesota plus 1.5 for plus 175. Over 3.5 minus 188. Under 3.5 plus 137. This price is also completely indefensible. We probably need to vote which is the worst price: the London, Florida price, Boston, LAG price, or this one. Um, this price. Like, here's the thing. I think a lot of people are saying Minnesota is bad. I don't know why they're saying that. Um, but it seems like people are saying, like, people are really on board of this, and we have no evidence. Like, sure, okay, Minnesota could have taken a step back this year. It's very possible, but Optic also has not proven anything at all this year. Definitely not enough to be a minus 600. Um, Minnesota Optic at minus 600 is not proven at all. That is nowhere near. That is nowhere near is good anyways. Like, that's nowhere near right what the price should be anyways. So, like, yeah, I'm on Minnesota here. Give me the spreads. Give me the plus 1.5 spread. Give me the money line. Um, Again, you might even start looking at some of these individual map spreads too. Like, I'm on Minnesota here. What do you think?
Yeah, completely agree. I do think that's a good question. Which of these prices is the most egregious? This might be it, actually. Right, you're paying that optic tax to begin with. Minnesota for yeah, I don't know what it is, but people are so low on them. I understand they got 3-0'd at the kickoff, but like it was a very, very close 3-0. Let's go map by map. They played New York, who have proven to be at least a good team. They lost Bocage 250 to 242. You know, it doesn't get much closer than 8 points. The Desert Siege Search was a 6-3 loss, so that was pretty convincing. And the control on Tuscan was, again, a map 5, or a, yeah, map 5, 3-2 loss. So it was close, man. They they probably shouldn't have got swept, but they did. Um, yeah, and Optic, again, people are, this price seems to suggest that Optic are in that tier with FaZe, with Toronto, you know, I guess with Seattle maybe. We're still trying to figure all that out. Um, Optics should be favored. That's, I don't argue with that, but yeah, it should not be this high. This is the biggest second biggest money line of any of the 10 matches this weekend. Like, the only one bigger is Atlanta minus 3,300 versus Paris. Like, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, give me Rocker. I know Optic are looking good in scrims. I get all that. Um, Now this is a situation where Rocker, they don't have a match to warm up with. This is their first one of this season. They get the Sunday nighter, so that's a little interesting. And Optic get one the day before against London. What I'll say is just wait, because Optic, if if like the world makes sense, Optic should beat London. This price versus Minnesota should go up. So I would wait. If you get Rocker like plus 400 or even higher, that could be a huge, huge success for you. Yeah, I just I can't justify being this down on Rocker. Like, since they've had this team of Standy, Attach, Major Maniac, and Priesta, they've been really solid. They outslayed New York in the hard point convincingly. They couldn't turn that into hill time. If they can clean up that stuff, like, this Rocker team should be top 6. I don't see why not. I think the 3-0 is just in a lot of people's heads as like, oh yeah, see, that's proof that Minnesota is not in this middling tier. They're one below that. But I mean, I need more map. If they get 3-0'd again, maybe I'll consider Minnesota as like a bottom 4 team, but until that happens, I still think they're a middle of the pack team. If I think Texas is a, top of the pack team, do I think a best team in the league versus a middling team should be minus 550, minus 600? Not really. Like, that's just way too much. Way too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I think this actually did open up at plus 400 and plus 200. I grabbed both Minnesota money line and spread. Yeah, I like, and the thing is, it would be classic Optic, would it not? Would that not be classic Optic? They go out, they 3-0 London, and then they come back, and then they lose like 3-1 to Minnesota or 3-2 to Minnesota. Be classic Optic. That would be like the most Optic thing to do, I think. Um, because, like, again, like, you see this if you bet NFL or other sports, there are certain teams that get so much public money, and Optic is one of those teams. And when you're when you can always get some value when you bet against some of those teams, like the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, or the um the Green Bay Packers. For a lot of these teams, there's a lot of opportunities you have to bet against them, and the books will give you amazing prices against them because they know people are going to be betting on optics. So the book doesn't care. Like the book will gladly give us our plus 200 and our plus 400 money lines against optic. They don't care because they know they need to balance out their books, right? So it's all a balancing act. But yeah, you can easily take advantage of some of those lines. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing: Minnesota could lose this game, right? Optic could win this game 3-1. It's very possible. I don't think they're going to though. But if they do, like, look, we found value in worst case scenarios that now we know Optic is a really good team, and then we'll just get an amazing opportunity to get bet against Optic next week when they play someone else, right? So, yeah, I mean, this Minnesota team has a lot to prove, but it's the same team as last year. I don't think they're like that much worse than they were last year, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting year and definitely an interesting week. We've got a lot of good matchups this week, and we'll have to see what we have next week. All right. Before we go, one thing we want to do now is we want to look at our Breaking Point fantasy submissions. So, breakingpoint.gg, they're a really cool Call of Duty League website. They're not technically affiliated with it, but it's run by EasyMac, and I believe Tactical Rab is involved in it as well. So you got a
Yep.
lot of people involved in the Call of Duty League. They run it involved in and around the Call of Duty League. They're part of it, and they have these fantasy contests where you get to make picks. You get to basically pick some players. Is it kind of like a fantasy pool? It's scored and there's prizes. It's really cool. It's really great, and it seems like it's a really cool idea, and it's free too, right? That's the best part of it too, right? So you don't have to like we're talking about betting like our hard-earned money on this. This is completely free, right? So if with a low price of free, anything is good to have. So I've this is actually kind of my first introduction to fantasy sports. I've never actually really played fantasy sports before. I know of it, obviously, but I'm not completely familiar with the strategy. So I'll let you go ahead and explain. Go ahead and explain how it works and what kind of your strategy is when you're picking players on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, it's very fun. It makes watching the CDL, I think, more entertaining. Like, say I only do like I played DraftKings Call of Duty for the last couple of years, and bet a little bit. I find it more entertaining to like track my players when I'm watching the games than like track my bets, if that makes sense. We're just rooting for specific players, very specific outcomes, that sort of thing. DraftKings is back this year. I'm pumped for that. But yeah, this breaking point contest should be fun. Pretty easy, yeah, for free. And you only have to make your lineup once per stage. So I'm imagine they have this one right now that'll run for the stage one qualifier matches. And then I imagine they'll do another one for the major, for the first major. They'll do another one for the stage two qualifiers. Stage two major gets its own. So there's probably going to be 10 of these throughout, or 8 of these throughout the year, unless they do one at champs as well. Either way, it's a lot of fun. So you essentially have a budget to work with. The Breaking Point staff, I'm not sure exactly who, it might be Easy Mac. They essentially put a price on each starter. So the most expensive guys are $9. Again, this is not real money. You get a budget of $25, and you get to draft 4 players. So you can't just take the best players in the league. If you do take the best players, you're gonna have to dig at the bottom, and find some value down there. So, yeah, we've made a couple lineups. I've got mine. Robert's got his, excuse me, and we'll kind of walk you through our mindset for each of those, or for like each of the picks we made, kind of the roster construction as a whole. So, my team, I'll just riff off here. And there's a theme that I unintentionally made, where all of them start with S's. So we've got Simp, we've got Sib, we've got Scump, and we've got Slasher. Now, Simp, $8. Sib is 7, and then Scump and Slasher are both $5. That gets you to exactly $25. I can't spend any more. I could spend less if I wanted to, but That's where we're at. My thought process on these guys are basically strength of schedule for stage one. So I recently tweeted out each team's relative strength of schedule for their first 5 matches of the year, which is what this contest goes through. The top 4 teams are, in terms of easiest, Optic Texas, then Atlanta FaZe, then LA Gorillas, then Seattle Surge. So you'll see that all 4 of my players are from those teams. Tried to balance it out with players that I think will bounce back and players that have proven themselves. So Simp didn't have a great kickoff. I think he'll bounce back. He was last year's MVP. He's been amazing since he's been playing Call of Duty. Sib, I think, is just a solid player that is maybe getting overlooked on the Seattle team. A lot of people like Pred. He obviously has popped off in the kickoff. Sib had his moments too. I think they were a little kind of went under the radar. So that's a good pivot play. Because when talking about these sort of like fantasy contests, it does matter. Like ownership percentages matters a little bit. If you think 2 players are comparable, take the player who you think will be on less teams as a way to get leverage on other teams. So I expect so both Pred and Sib, who both play for Seattle, are $7. I think they're close in terms of talent and then fantasy points they'll put up. So I'll go with Sib because I think Pred is a higher owned player. And then again, Scump, he's on a very good team. He had a very bad kickoff, to say the least. He should bounce back with opponents like London, Paris. He gets Minnesota, Boston. Those should be wins. And then Slasher is my last pick. Again, LAG, we've talked about a lot. Just an under the radar team. I don't think a lot of LAG players are going to get picked. And I do think Slasher provides some level of security as the main AR on that team. And he did put up okay numbers despite the loss at the kickoff. So there's a lot of ways you can go about it. That's how I built my team. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Robert, you want to go over your lineup?
Yeah, sure. So I've got I'm going with Kenny, Pred, Hook, and Dave Patty. Um, what happens is when you look at this, a lot of the times you're going with you kind of have to pick like 2 better players, and then to fit into the 25, you have to fit kind of 2 worse players. Kenny, because I think he was the best player on LA Thieves. I think they're actually a really good team, so I'm expecting him to have um a pretty good stage too. Again, just because they're playing a hard schedule doesn't necessarily mean that a team is going to perform badly. And again, if you're picking the best player on the team, then that's still like they'll still clear up on kills even if you're playing a good player, good teams. Pred, because of Seattle, Seattle's pretty good. I think it's basically between him and Sib. I think they're the ones to pick up. Um, they seem to be the strongest of the 2, but a lot of people are going to go with Sib, so I'll pick Pred just to be kind of a little different there. Hook, he's a great value pick at 5. I mean, the thing of it is, I think he has amazing potential to pop off. He was actually pretty good during the Kickoff Classic. So I kind of do like him to, I like him to improve well, improve from last year and then kind of carry that through and do well. I think he's just a great value pick at 5, and it's hard to kind of pass up that value with him at $5. And then Dave Patty for $5. He actually really like completed this Florida team in their win against LAG. And again, it's an amazing value pick at $5. Again, you just because a team doesn't have like your best players, right? Like it's not stuffed with like insight and selling him, right? There's a lot of value in some of these lower players, right? So yeah, I kind of really like Dave Patty. I'm high on Florida. As you'll notice, it's kind of a trend between the teams that I'm kind of higher on than the conventional wisdom, and also I threw in Pred there. But I think that's generally the consensus here is that if you're higher on some teams than the conventional wisdom, those teams will probably play off. That being said, my picks are probably worse than CDL Metrics. So you should probably you should tail his picks, or not completely,
No, we'll
not
see. We'll see.
we'll see. I don't know. I'm still used to this fantasy thing. It's something I'm much more looking forward to. Obviously, for this week, I don't have model projections out. I'm still waiting on a little bit more data for this year then to come out for after that. But yeah, then I'll start posting projections. And like I think in terms of the space of like fantasy, at least, well, so much in fantasy Call of Duty, like that's growing a lot too. But also with LeanTossup, right, we have the NFL model, and I'm looking to get a lot more player specific on that in the next year. Obviously, the NFL season's almost over as we sit here a week from the Super Bowl, but no, I mean, once that's done in the off season, it's going to go through some renovations. It's going to have some changes made to it, and we're going to have a lot more player focus on that. I think there's a whole new level of like things to bet on and value you could find in players. And I think that's some really good value there. So I think we're going to be looking at that a lot. And yeah, I think we can. I think we're gonna I think we're gonna focus a lot more on player specific stuff in the future, and I think that's gonna be one of the first areas. One of the cool areas is gonna be focusing that for Call of Duty. So yeah. So anyway, thank you for coming on. CDL Metrics, as always. It's been fun and great insight, and we're both agreeing on everything. So maybe that's either gonna be really good or really bad. I don't know. We'll
But besides that Atlanta versus Paris minus
yeah.
2.5 spread, I think we, yeah, just about agreed on everything. So, we'll see where we end up after this week. Maybe we just gotta forget all of our priors, or maybe we hit on everything and we're geniuses, but,
Yeah,
only time will tell.
when Boston 3-0's LAG, then we'll be sad. We'll be very sad. But no, we'll see. I don't think that's gonna happen. We'll see. Who knows? That could happen, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you for coming on, and yeah, I'm excited to watch a brand new week of COD. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. We'll see ya.
All right. See you, everybody.